Tyler Reddick emerging from all the chaos and handing 2311 a victory in the Great American Race. And who would have thought just a couple of months ago that you would be seeing Michael Jordan and Jim France shaking hands right in front of the Harley J. Earl Trophy in Victory Lane at Daytona? But that was what we had here. Brandon, I just kind of want to get your initial thoughts and reaction to what we saw yesterday. Very thankful NASCAR moved the race up an hour so we could get that in before the rain came. Thankful to finally have, it feels like every year for the last several years, we've had the race moved to Monday or moved into prime time because we've had showers pop up and delay the race. Thankful that we got that all in and really got everything in on time pretty much all week. But what was your reaction to the 68th running of the Daytona 500?
Ben, glad to be on this new show and talking about a Daytona 500 that ended with some daylight still in the air. It was nice to have it done an hour early, all things considered, and also I think two hours and some change after the checkered flag flew. We had rain in the area, which is normal for Central Florida, so it worked out in our favor this year. But it was also good to have a 500-mile race, wouldn't you know it, end in 500 miles. That's always a plus. We'll take that any year for the Daytona 500, as you know, following our show in the past. But it was a very different sort of Daytona 500 with the way the fuel mileage played in the final stage. And, of course, we know they're going to be three wide all throughout the field and just kind of biding their time and not completely 100% on the throttle. And a lot of people don't really, either they don't like it or they don't understand it. I think it's a little bit of both. It sure is entertaining to watch, but at the end of the day, when you know that they are basically biding their time and just kind of holding in place until the word go, until their manufacturers tell them it's time to dip down to pit lane, you can look at it that way, but there's a lot more strategy going on, I'm sure, than what meets our eyes. But I'm coming into 2026, Ben, with the chase for the cup back, and I'm fully optimistic about the slow improvement of the sport, and I think this was a very different Daytona 500 for some right reasons. And I say all of that before I get to the wrecking and carnage that was at the end, because of course, you're not going to have a night and day switch of the light from 25 to 26, but the problem still remains, Ben, that we haven't had that kind of Daytona 500 since 2017, when Kurt Busch got his one Daytona 500 ring, and that kind of Daytona 500 was more of the last era of 500-mile spectaculars that we've had. But this modern era, I guess you could say, it's much more survival, and who can just you get the fuel numbers right, but then who just has the luck to make it to the final lap, the final corner. And not even that we saw with this one. You got to make it to the stripe, and Chase Elliott just utter disbelief sitting up on the safer barrier. That's going to be, if it was 20 years ago, that would have been a Sam Bass painting next week. And that was just that's going to be an iconic image that they can use. Also, Bubba Wallace in the infield, you saw his frustration with the winning car, Tyler Reddick, in the background. By the way, let's talk about the winner, Tyler Reddick. My goodness, 2311. That's our whole segment here. Vindication for Michael Jordan. And you look at the winter they had, and to come here and finally get a Daytona 500 for this organization, and also for Michael Jordan, is just strange seeing the man holding the Harley J. Earl. But then also in a different way, it kind of felt like this was destined to happen at some point. But with the second driver, with the 45 team, oddly enough, the one that Kurt Busch had some time in before his untimely departure from the top echelon of racing in stock cars. But yeah, overall, with the fuel fuel mileage at the end, Ben, and then everyone coming back out, and all scattered around the track. It was, it was a whole lot of nothing there in that final stage, I guess, on a surface level. But then it was like, my goodness, where are we supposed to look? Like, it's go time. It's 15 laps to go. Why are we, we're all spread around, and I'm not sure who's really at the head of this thing. But when we got to those final few laps, I saw it on X. Someone said, yeah, Mike Joy still has his fastball, and boy, does he. I mean, even with the era that we're in, with how the Daytona 500 and drafting tracks operate, Mike Joy, he still has it. Just put on a whale of a call there for the final lap, and Clint Boyer, Kevin Harvick, they stepped away. They let him do his thing. That's one of those things that I look at for it. But Tyler Reddick, finally a Daytona 500 champion, and it's just a different era we're in with how these races run. Unfortunately, it has some to do with the car, some to do with maybe how these drivers have been programmed to think when it comes down to the final laps. But I will take this over some of the things we've had over the last few years any day of the week, especially when you look at the Gen 7 era of racing, and two of the last, between in the Gen 7 Daytona 500s, only two of them have not had a overtime finish. I believe that was the stat there. Just so happy to not have overtime and not have to deal with that. And also, hats off to NASCAR. This probably will get lost in the weeds, but hats off to NASCAR for not putting out the yellow. I know Jeb Burton was, where's the yellow?
I was gonna say, yeah.
Consistently inconsistent, yada yada yada. But I'm glad they didn't do that in this case, personally, because if they had, it would have looked like they were handing Chase Elliott the win, and also if we had to restack it would have been another carnage in turn 3 like you've seen every other year. But this was a welcome change to the Daytona 500 bottom line for me. I'm curious to know your thoughts.
Well, very thankful that we got to finish under green, and the leader at mile number 500 was the winner. Those have been far from guarantees in the last decade or so, like you were mentioning, Brandon. Even the 2017 race, I remember thinking, the first race of the stage racing era, at least for the Cup Series. I guess you had trucks and Xfinity at the time, and I apologize in advance. I'm sure I'm going to butcher that. I know it's the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series now. We're going to try to get used to that. It doesn't help that Xfinity still has a massive presence in the sport, and Xfinity Racing's Twitter account is still active, and they're still all over Bubba Wallace's car. I mean, we're still going to be seeing that name all year as race fans. But even that race, I thought in 17, I still remember hopping on a Facebook Live that NASCAR and NBC was doing, and Parker Kligerman was reading out comments and were saying, "Oh, this one's interesting. I like the stages, but don't throw the cautions." And I was thinking to myself, maybe they're onto something. Even in 2017 when we were first introducing this, because when you're racing to a predetermined caution point, I felt like that was leading to wreckfests even back then. Thankfully, that race calmed down a little bit. Maybe it helped that we still have a damaged vehicle policy. I think was only 5 minutes at the time, and a lot of cars had fallen out, so there weren't as many potential places where accidents could happen and cautions could come back out as a result. But that was an interesting finish. Obviously, fuel mileage playing a role in that as well, and Kurt Busch winning his one and only Daytona 500. But ever since then, it's felt like it's either been we have to go into multiple overtimes, or maybe we finish on lap 200, but we wreck on the last lap. I think 2021 was like that, if I remember correctly. That was the year with the big fireball and Chase Elliott, Michael McDowell, who was ahead of one another. That one, obviously. And, of course, when the wreck is that serious, then I have no problem with them throwing the caution immediately. But this one, again, I can see where, you can look at it and say, well, there's consistent inconsistencies, but I think where the wrecks happened, how serious the hits were, I know there was a lot of talk. I think Jeff Gluck even pointed this out as well. Even he didn't realize just how big the first incident was in turn 1 of the last lap, but everybody obviously had enough time to slow down before they piled on into that. So I have no problem with NASCAR letting them race back to the end of the 500 miles for Daytona here. Obviously, big win for 2311. massive for the sport, I think, to have a figure like Michael Jordan in victory lane Daytona. And shout out MJ and Brad Daugherty, the former teammates at University of North Carolina. Basketball legends, both of them, and both now in the last 3 years Daytona 500 winning car owners, because of course Brad Daugherty is part of the JTG team with Ricky Stenhouse that won it in 2023, so they got something else in common now as well. And all four of those 2311 cars, really. I mean, I know some people are getting on Riley Herbst's case for attempting to block Brad Keselowski at the end, coming to the line there. It would have been really interesting to see if Brad had enough momentum. I don't know that he would have gotten to the win, but I think certainly could have at least gotten second with the run that he had. But then again, Riley Herbst is trying to win the 500 as well, and coming off of a pretty dismal rookie season, if we're being honest. A lot of times we'd forget that 2311 was a three-car team because Riley Herbst wasn't running anywhere near the front like Tyler and Bubba were. But and then, of course, Bubba Wallace leading a race high total of laps, and Corey Heim up there as well in their fourth entry of the 67 car. But it's going to be out here for, I think, up to 12 races this year. His schedule is going to be. So all four of those cars in with a shot there at the end. And they ended up getting it with the 45 car, which, by the way, I didn't have a tweet saved, probably should have, but I think Clable was the one that pointed this out. When B.J. McLeod spun in the opening laps, the first caution of the day, Tyler Reddick very nearly got hooked in the right rear as B.J. was coming down the track, and it's funny to look back at those things in light of what ended up happening at the end of the race. Yeah. But this race is just as much about survival as it is bringing a fast car, and we'll get into that, obviously, a little bit later.